true dragons.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back to the Planar Crossroads, and welcome back to our next episode in Nightmare Lairs. Ooh, I gotta change the title. While I do that, I will also ramble on. We have, this time, the Red Dragons. And we're taking these, like we said before, about 30 minutes at a time-ish, so that we can try to keep it consumable for everybody. And let's see, I'll shift up this color too. There we go. Put some black on the bottom. Dragons. Okay. Dragon layers. So, we're on red dragons this time, and Kane kind of started us off with white. So let's see. I'm going to put out some basic information like we did at the first one with the whites, and then we'll start with someone else so they can all start feeding ideas in. So general information on the age of a dragon is important to remember. They can go anywhere from 0 to 5 for a wormling, just a little baby, all the way up to 1,200 years old plus for a great worm. Arguably, not many dragons get that far because they start to fight amongst themselves for hordes and stuff, but that is important to remember. Like we talked about last time, always remember the kobolds, because those are important when you're dealing with dragons and their lairs. And those are the things to start off with this time. So, who wants to go first with reds?
Well, with no volunteers, I suppose I'll step up to it. Red dragons are, there's a joke in there about rune lords that I don't have, but just landed on, but it would have been good. I guess I did end up doing my hair just like Skoros's is, didn't I? Neat. But, they're the biggest of, like, at least so far as the chromatics go. This is the apex species. I don't often get to use them because the more I learn about myself as a game master, the more I realize I really like subjecting my players to horrible, terrible ice castles and things like that. And it's hard to do that when you have a creature that's like, I am the apex predator. I am bigger than all the other things. I'm smarter than all the other things. I can consume all the things because my tum-tum is so warm that it will break down whatever I can get my claws on for nutrition. And that just makes them, like, the most terrifying things. I think a little less in terms of the, like, don't go into this place, for it is the lair of some dragon. More like, this red dragon has woken up from its 500-year slumber. It's convinced all of the neighboring insert name of easy to, like, bully into submission people nearby that they need to go march on neighboring regions and such, or they're all going to die horribly. And then here comes this just mega monster who's going to kill you, kill all of his new friends, take all of their stuff, and then just, like, loop again. It feels very extinction level event, a red dragon does.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. I mean, we feel that way a lot because the iconic red dragon was Smaug from The Hobbit. That's where where a lot of the lore for dragons and stuff and their hordes really started to come into play. Because before this, if you just a little history on how dragons were thought of. Dragons weren't, intelligent. They were like big creatures and beasts to fight, not necessarily, at least Western dragons, I should say, not necessarily these smart things. But Smaug changed that in the legend. There were some legends that were that way, but most of the time dragons were things to be conquered and slain rather than talked to at your own peril.
At your own peril. When I was talking to Connor earlier, he also mentioned Smaug, and he said how he was kind of frustrated that Smaug was such an awesome concept because it made it very difficult to integrate it into a game. Because I agreed. I would also love to do a red dragon who took over a dwarven city, because that encounter writes itself. Like you have like all the dwarven vaults. That's all like that's the dragon's hoard, and then you have this huge like 3-dimensional like cityscape that's carved into the interior of the mountain. That you can like do this. You could do like a running fight through the dwarvish city with the dragon.
We didn't bring that up on the Lairs though. White dragon lairs and red dragon lairs, using phases in your fights as you battle through a lair is actually really, really good. That is something that 5e does good, and I think it took from other games, is the idea of lair actions. That the terrain has actions. So that is something to incorporate. What about What about you, Levi? You got anything specific you want to mention?
So, I hadn't had it in my head before, but I think the amount to which red dragons want to, will, and can influence the societies and people around them is an important and interesting point. I know I really liked the idea of a red dragon lair being part of a volcano. Kane at that point brought up that it would probably be better if it was inactive. Now I agree with that more, because I love the idea that the red dragon can activate the volcano when it wants.
Oh shit! Yeah.
So the entire area around that knows that the second they stop following this thing's demands, it is literally, not even just from itself, but it will take the volcano to make the nice extinction level event around it. And then whoever doesn't die from that, it'll kill personally, because it's worse than the volcano.
Yeah, because this thing is evil. Like, think what you want about alignments. This thing is evil. It is nasty and conniving and ugly and mean.
It's one of the reasons alignment exists.
Yeah.
So you can clearly paint the, no, this kills you.
Yeah.
You want to talk? Okay, make a reflex save. Whoops.
Yeah, I need the alternate history version of Earth where a red dragon is holed up in Yellowstone National Park in the volcano.
Oh!
Wasn't Vin Diesel in that movie? That was a legit thing.
Was it?
Okay, someone remembers.
There was
It was some weird post-apocalyptic movie. Vin Diesel was in it. Dragons happened. There was an apocalypse.
No, you're not thinking about Vin Diesel. You're thinking about Matthew McConaughey, who cut his hair shaved off.
Was that Matthew McConaughey?
That was Matthew McConaughey. He got jacked.
Rain of Fire?
Yeah.
But they had a really interesting way of talking about how the dragons worked. In that movie, this is not really the lore for most things, because in that movie, they were big beasties to be slain. But in the movie, they had it to where they had two different secretions, and they mixed together chemically, and when they came in contact while in combination with the air, they made fire. So if you're looking for scientific understanding on how these particular things might work in a more gritty setting, that's one way to do the fire breath. And then you also had the spoiler alert for a movie that sounds like not that many people
Go
have really
for
watched.
it.
From a
20
B
years
movie
old.
from 2002.
The big revelation, one of the big revelations they had, is they could never kill all the dragons because they couldn't find the breeders. It turned out that they did it like fish. The females would lay a bunch of eggs, and then this one really big male would come around, and he was the one that made the eggs fertile. And he didn't have to stay long. All he did was just come and go. Yeah. So
The old ejaculate and evacuate, you know.
Also, Christian Bale was in this movie? Wow,
Yep.
weird. I fell down a deep hole.
yes, you did.
Anyway.
Early
But what I like-
2000s movies. That's a weird place to find yourself.
Yeah.
Bald Matthew McConaughey is so weird. What the... I can't...
He was pretty buff in that movie too. So he did.
Well, you had to be a straggler on the edge of society trying to grow corn and not die.
You know, arguably
That's what I remember about that movie.
arguably in Apocalypse, people would not be jacked at all. They would be very scrawny, but very muscly. They'd be wiry.
Yeah.
You wouldn't
Hard
have
like a
protein
coffin
in it.
nail.
Yeah.
All right, we're off the subject of dragons now, talking about buff Matthew McConaughey.
So So other than like volcanoes, which I suppose are like an obvious pick for a red dragon, like where else would you think to put one, if anywhere?
Well, I actually have ran a red dragon as a big baddie, if you remember.
That's true. We never got to fight him though.
No, and it would have been a big thing. So, if no one has anything specific to go over, I'll go over some of my notes and talk about Undeliver's Hackstar decks.
I have some thoughts here.
Okay.
When you're talking about bringing your party in to a red dragon's lair, and you're bringing that up as an encounter, you're talking about something that is epic and classic. You kind of, I feel, have a right at this point as a game master to preserve the classic threat of the red dragon. Go over the top. This thing takes what it wants. It makes what it wants of its neighbors. You shouldn't be... When you enter a dragon's lair, you aren't in the volcano. You aren't in the ancient ruined city. No, you've come through desolated cities and kingdoms of waste and ruin. There should be obsidian shards that line the streets on the way to this thing. It is letting you know what it is, what you're in for, and that it is as grand as you and as the players want to imagine it to be. The treasure should be over the top. The art decor should be over the top. The minions that it has enslaved should be over the top. Literally take when your PCs come in, they should see a giant red dragon bones skeleton just draped over the entrance and be like, maybe that was this thing's father. This thing tried. It failed. It's a trophy. You're a snack. If they're going in, your players want this experience, and they have some cleric in the far off city ready to cast resurrection with some toenail clippings that works, then let them bring it on. Everything in there should be a threat beyond any level, like even the treasure. Red Dragon might just be like, you've got a book. If you know what's it? The Deck of Many Things. Imagine that is a treasure in a red dragon's lair. Oh, you made it this far. You're brave. You're strong. You came to challenge me. How about you just take this? It'll wreck your lives if you've ever played with one of those. Or something chaotic. Something that's self-destructive, and maybe he wants to see what they'll do with it, or give him a chance. A dragon like a giant red ancient dragon knows it's the classical threat, knows it's the villain, knows it's worth being challenged. Maybe they give a boon to the PCs. Yeah, that's the magic sword you need over there. Here's the ancient tome that you need over here. This right here is, maybe he reveals his weak spot. Oh, this is what you need to do. And just draw them in. Give them a glimmer of hope and then destroy them. Let them know that even the red dragon itself, it's got its own idea of how this fight is going to go. It's going to magnify itself through it. You are invited as far as you want. You're just part of a big display. And I think players like that. They like to feel like, oh, we have the chance to not just be clever ourselves, but we're going to out-clever. We're going to out-big. We're going to be out-grandiose. Let the dragon fill that role, too.
Well, arguably, the red dragon is the one that's most likely of the characteristic chromatics to feel like a PC. To feel like a player character that just got that strong. So I could see how that works.
Yeah, that's like, those are all amazing points. The red dragon, especially like adult and older, like the ancient red dragon, is like they're the fucking T1000 of dragons. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're smarter. They have the highest innate caster level. Like, if you go up against, like, we went straight from like the lowest CR to the highest CR dragon from white to red. If you go in against a red dragon in their dormant volcano lair that they have, because I'm going to base these off Pathfinder because they're the dragons with the abilities I'm familiar with. Like, he has literally melted archways through the stone of the mountain this volcano is a part of. He's filled the area with smoke because it doesn't bother him, but that's hell for you guys. You can't see through it, you can't breathe it, and he's laughing, dude. Like, he's in there sitting on his, like, gargantuan creature recumbent Shay lounge, like, just the most opulent and imperial, ridiculously over the top, like you said earlier, Zach. Just king to excuse my French, but King Dick of Fuck Mountain, like the the biggest, nastiest, scariest thing in 500 miles in any other direction.
And he knows it.
Yeah. Red Dragons, we were talking about their sort of respective territories. Red Dragons probably have a significantly smaller
smaller need.
Well, I was going to say like a smaller need for territory because the areas they live in might be particularly rich with prey and with cultures. Yeah, cultures that would give them tribute to avoid becoming prey. But also, like, there's sort of the threat of, like, other dragons, especially other red dragons, seeking to, like, take over and assimilate their territory for their own. So I think, like, a red dragon's territory might be noticeably smaller, because I think it's probably the most likely to be close to, like, mortal civilizations, but it's definitely the most hotly, like, contested and defended.
Mm-hmm.
Go 20 feet past that rock, you're suddenly incinerated.
Yeah, and the kobolds, I think, that serve a red dragon are probably the most heavily, like, their ranks are probably the most heavily filled out with spellcasters. I think
Somebody's
that's
gonna cast
something.
Profire on all the kobolds, so when
I
Dad
think
gets angry, he doesn't just
would go for it.
Yeah. I would say that between them and the blue dragons, that's probably correct.
Mm-hmm.
As far as chromatics.
I would think that Red Dragon kobolds would have a lot of weaponry and equipment, just because you have all of these epic heroes that are going in classically to slay the dragon, and the dragon's just like, yeah, sure, just here you go.
Yeah, because they breed so fast, he's like, I'll just throw some kobolds at him in the upper parts of my lair,
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about it. They can have... That's like giving... You literally have kobolds that may be level 1 or 2, but they've got a plus whatever longsword of smiting or, something like
God.
that. It's like, this level 2 kobold's running around with this gear that would be a level 20 player. That's no joke.
Warrior 1 kobold with a Holy Avenger.
Just like has a +5 Vorpal Great Axe because he's crit fishing, and I gotta roll a 20 to hit you, man. I rolled a 20. You don't have a head anymore.
That would tick somebody off so bad.
Oh yeah. No, I think to lean into that theme, if you wanted to use some like named kobolds that serve the dragon, I would go for like the big powerhouse classes. There are no fighters, there are no rangers, there are no rogues in these kobolds. They're all like blood ragers and blaster sorcerers,
champions,
and champions. Just like the hardest
anti-paladins of Dahak.
Yes, just like the hardest hitting classes out there that just are just focused on like laying down as much damage and like as big a show as possible.
Yeah. Okay, Levi, do you have any other points before I go into my notes?
Yes.
Okay.
We in the chat had talked about the lovely idea of a dragon's horde being smokes and incense. Zachariah was bringing up the really interesting point of utterly decimated cities, and I can't get the image out of my head of an entire city having been infused with cigars and other smell goods just so the dragon could smell it from his lair. And that's the only reason he torched that area. It's just because it's upwind from his home and he wants to smell it constantly.
That's amazing.
He torches the tobacco fields in the north just so he can smell them burn.
I mean, the town along with it too, but you need some earthy hints of
Peep.
living being.
That nice umami smell.
Okay, but the dragon literally has to describe it that way.
Yeah. He uses with your dragons. You make sure to use appropriate prose, and it's like, oh, it's just got this earthy hint in the scent right there, but there's this tang. See, you only get that from elf.
Real specific.
Yeah.
Real
As
down
you
to
would
the
be,
fantasy
yeah.
race.
Oh,
35 intelligence or whatever.
The
Yeah.
red dragon is literally breeding humanoids for the smell and taste.
Yes,
I mean, yeah,
the red dragon would do that. See,
that's chaotic evil.
That is.
that leads nicely into the notes, because their favorite food are humans, most particularly females, and young elves. You might have a dragon that's
That's the same as green dragons too, actually.
Well, you might have with the elves. That makes sense with the green dragons.
Yeah, green dragons hate elves.
But the red dragons are much more tactical than than a green dragon might be, as far as long term. I'm going to farm this type of thing, like Levi's talking about. So you might have something where they literally have these two countries go to war for them and play dragon chess with them, basically, so that this red dragon can just pick off all the elves it wants, because it like makes all the men go to war while the women are back there, and it goes and eats them, and it specifically waits until they've emptied almost all their armies, and then it goes and harries their children and their women for food.
Big bad evil dragon.
Pretty much.
The Babette.
Bad. So, the notes say, as from the books that we mentioned before, The Practical Guide to Dragons and The Practical Guide to Dragon Magic, both from Dungeons & Dragons, their main enemy is not the white dragons, it's the silver dragons. And when we get to the metallics, you will understand why the silver dragons hate the red dragons so much.
It's going to be interesting when we get into the metallics, because depending on, there's not like a lot of official supported representation for the metallic kobolds, because they're mostly very rare, if they exist at all.
They exist in my setting. You guys encountered some, actually. The bronze dragon of Sonora and her kobold crew. They love parties. So the habitat that they list is mountains and high plains. Now I'm going to touch on that with Hicks Tarndax in a minute. And we already touched on how volcanoes are real nice, especially when you remember that volcanoes and their eruptions like to form gems and precious stones. So they don't even have to decorate. They can just have them there.
It's in the walls!
Yeah. It's in the walls. Oh, I need a little more gold on this side. I'll take this dragon fistful of gold and stick it to the wall and go and just shape it up in there. So you got that. When they have a clutch, they tend to their younglings through the youngest of the pairing tends the young. So it doesn't matter if it's the male or the female dragon, whichever one's the younger, basically the one that can be made to do it, will do it. And then once they're hatched, they're kind of on their own. And this seems to be pretty common amongst the chromatics. Though I think when we get to either the black or the green, they actually tend to their young some. But I may have to be corrected on that. And Kane and Levi and I were talking in the Discord before, and we talked about incense as a tribute. Levi brought the incense up, and Kane thought about the Cuban cigar smoking red dragon. And I actually think that's really fitting that he's the one that said that, because it made me think of this red dragon equipped with a gargantuan fedora, smoking a gargantuan sized stogie, and just sitting there. And He's the mob
That was-
boss of the area.
It was actually the word I was thinking of too, was stogie, because we always run the dragons as them all being able to polymorph into humanoids. So I was just picturing just like a big fat like human dragon just like sat on a chair, sort of leaned over the back with a fat stogie just stuck out of the corner of his mouth.
Yeah. And you can run that idea in any era, because you had mob bosses in the past. They weren't called that, but you had them. You got mob bosses in the present, and you'll have mob bosses in the future. So you can run that in any era.
And they all smoke cigars.
Yeah. Well, they would be that would be interesting. They would be absolutely opposed to the trend of vaping.
Gosh.
That's disgusting. You're breathing water into your lungs. What are you doing, you stupid, stupid human?
Is this what young adolescent red dragons do to tick off their parents?
Oh, it's the rebellious phase.
Uh,
The problem with being a red dragon youngling and going through a rebellious phase is your parents will just eat you.
that's true.
One of the other ones is that a red dragon storm shell, so if you have a character that wants to go and learn from them, it's called a charstrix. And that's where you would go for apprenticeship and training and stuff like that. And now, I guess, is as good a time as any to talk about on Delanos Hextardax, the red dragon that I ran. And he very much was a thinking red dragon. He liked to experiment with his blood and different things and what it would do to other humanoids and other creatures and stuff. So that's something that you can give your dragons, especially in their lairs, as a quark that they like to do. So trying to stay focused on both a build up to a dragon's lair and going and facing the dragon. On the build up to the lair, my Kane and then two of my other players, they had made this literal 6-month journey across half of the continent that they were currently on to take Johnson, who was, spoilers, a polymorphed silver dragon, and something he was carrying and maintaining with him to the port city of Port Marla. And they were there, and Kane's character was Magpie. No, it was Ignatius.
Nope.
Ignatius.
This was the alchemist.
Yeah, Magpie is where you got the Tengu inspiration from this thing for Magpie. So Ignatius had a ties to the mob there, which were run by had heavy connections to the magpies in the area, the Kinku in the area, or whatever you want to call them, the Tengu, whichever name your system has for them.
Mhm.
The bird people.
The crow people. So they had heavy ties to that, and so as they would, as they got closer, they knew that they might have to deal with stuff like that. And Kane, I think his character was going to end up having to interact with them at some point while he was there, because he was basically, still kind of under their influence and stuff. I didn't much like that, and I also knew who they were connected to, and I wanted to kind of free up Kane's character to be able to move more freely abroad without having to worry about that connection. So when Delanos came in, and he came in for his pay, came in for his money, and they didn't necessarily know on Delanos was that, because on Delanos looked like this very regal. He kept himself in a very regal human form of very dark black hair, long, Middle Eastern styled face and skin with very rich robes and such, and he kept himself that way. And he went in there and obliterated that entire mob, that entire part of the city, because they didn't give him what they were supposed to. He wrecked everything in there. And
Oh yeah, no, I remember that. I remember us combing through the wreckage of their entire complex, and the only two people that were still alive was We had constantly compared him to Jabba the Hutt because he was a very, very fat Tengu.
Because he was Tengu the Hutt.
Yeah. Between him and his interpreter were the only two things left alive in that entire complex. And they only remained alive long enough for me to choke some information out of them.
Yep. About his kidnapped wife, who they were using as leverage. Who they found out got sold. Which Ignatius was really ticked about.
Yeah, sad times. Sad times for a sad boy who was full of PCP.
Yeah, the mob boss didn't make it out. And the paladin didn't stop him because he was a lawful neutral paladin, and what he didn't see he had no sway over, type of thing.
Plausible deniability. They were dead when I got here.
Well, they were as good as dead. But so after that, that's the kind of the build-up. And when you're dealing with a big bad that you're gonna like, if this red dragon is gonna be at the end of your campaign, you build up like that. You build up with things happening along the lines. And Delanos was a constant threat to them because of connection not just in general to Johnson, but he also was present at the siege of the Elven stronghold that they also went to. And he killed Johnson. He succeeded at killing a silver dragon. And if that's not an ego boost for a red dragon, I don't know what is. Because Johnson was old. Older than Hextarndax. And Delanos took him out. With the help of his dragon rider, he couldn't defeat Delanos. Because Delanos had class levels. And, stuff like that.
That's cheating. Class levels.
But it led up, and what it leads into in this discussion is the lair that I ended up having for him was going to be an entire city was his lair. Everybody in the city answered to Delanos or one of his other aliases, and the entire city in this castaway part of the earth was his. And he, through machinations of that city as well as connections and his ability to travel back and forth, because he's this powerful person, he could just have someone teleport him somewhere or teleport himself. He's got the items for it. He can move around. So all of that machinations got him this city, and they were going to be able to find out that he headquarters in a specific mansion, and underneath that mansion was just a honeycomb. It was going to be a mega dungeon. They would crawl through to get slowly down. And as they got further down, there were pipes. And he could keep track of where they were in his dungeon because it's his house. And so he would have these pipes in the walls where when he was ready and he saw them there, he could breathe into one of the pipes where he was, and it would come out where they were.
Yeah,
Nice.
we were literally would have been stuck in the Bowser's basement with the spinning flame walls.
Yep. And he was really. I would have liked to see them fight him. Since they didn't get to the story did end, and they did, off screen type of beat him and stuff like that. In fact, one of them took him and made him no, actually, it wouldn't have been one of them. One of the characters would have found him and turned him into basically a Dracolich, and manipulated him. That would have been Samus. Would have returned for revenge.
Oh, right, I remember.
And controlled him controlled him out of revenge, and made him his herald, as he was was destined to be one of the divine anchors in the new universe. But that's a whole bunch of world building that doesn't mean anything to anybody else but me. So, short story is using that in your lair, using the build up, and then using different machinations like the pipes that lead to where he is, so he can just spit dragon fire at them at certain points when he's ready to, or having the kobolds in there and them just wrecking stuff. Because That's one of the things I added to the list on our talk to or how to thing. How to run kobolds effectively. 'Cause that gets really nasty.
So
Like a
saith
crowd of-
Tucker, so saith we all.
Yes.
So,
Just a crowd of tiny assholes.
all right. We're at the 35-minute mark. Do we have any other things besides stogie smoking, fedora wearing, red dragon mobsters?
Milady eats you alive.
That's my luncheon.
So good to
Not
have
for
you
me,
for
though.
dinner.
Ugh.
Terrible.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we will call the red dragons talked about and good in their lair. And so, as always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.